Okay, so welcome to another educational and inspiring AAM workshop, this one entitled Vegan Hospitality. Meredith Marin, CEO of Vegan Hospitality, will cover how she used her community organizing background as a social worker to turn Aruba into the most vegan-friendly island in the Caribbean. She'll also offer top tips for vegan customers, how to advocate for yourself as a customer, communicate effectively with servers and chefs, and give honest feedback to restaurants and hotels in a way that will inspire change, whether you're traveling or in your hometown. She'll also talk about what vegan hospitality consulting is, how you can start consulting for restaurants to make vegan options more accessible in your community and beyond. And my name is Michelle Granberg. I'm your moderator, and I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey. I've been a vegan and activist for almost 6 years. AAM's mission is to eradicate violence and build a culture of empathy and compassion, which ultimately results in animal liberation. We strive to build a global community of activists through our free online program that pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we strive to generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public on various aspects of animal rights activism. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person events. AAM is also proud to be fueled by FARM, the Farmed Animal Rights Movement, one of the oldest AR organizations in the country. If you're interested in applying to become a mentor or mentee, or want to get involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Our guest speaker, Meredith Marin, is a vegan entrepreneur with a background in social work and community organizing. She's founder and CEO of Vegan Hospitality, the largest worldwide professional vegan consultant network and only company offering vegan hospitality consultant certification. Her website's veganhospitality.com, and she'll talk more about that. We will open up for Q&A after the presentation. Also very pleased that one of our mentors, Shreya, is with us. She's also going to share her experiences with vegan hospitality. So we'll let you know when the Q&A is to begin. Now I'm going to turn it over to Meredith. Go ahead, Meredith, and take it away.
Hi, thank you. All right, and Michelle, you'll be admitting participants. I don't have to monitor that because I see more people keep joining. Okay, awesome, fantastic. Well, it's so great to see everyone here. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and if you've just joined, I would love to hear in the chat box where you're tuning in from, where you're zooming in from. Let me get my screen shared. Okay. Just going to pull up the chat so I can see everybody. Canada, awesome. Florida, hi, Jamie. I'm also in Florida. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Okay, more Canada, awesome. I know Chris is here from Costa Rica. Canada, okay, exciting. All right, excellent. Well, it's nice to meet all of you. And I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're tuning in to learn more about vegan hospitality and also about what it's like as a customer to be vegan and want to advocate for yourself and want to learn new tips on how to do that. So that's what we're talking about today. At the most, maybe you're going to go off and transform the hospitality industry. And if this doesn't motivate you to do that, at least you'll be able to get a decent meal by the end of this workshop. So that is my goal. Like Michelle said, I'm the founder and CEO of Vegan Hospitality. And what I do is I manage a network of vegan consultants who I train, and we have consultants all over the world on every continent except for Antarctica at this point. And I also lead consultant teams to do consulting work in the hospitality industry. So we help restaurants, hotels become vegan friendly. So let's get started. And if you have any questions throughout, you're welcome to just drop them in the chat box. And if I can answer them right away, I will. If not, then you're also welcome to ask them at the end. what we'll cover today, I'm going to talk about my experience. I started consulting in Aruba, which is an amazing Caribbean island. You probably heard of it in that song, Aruba, Jamaica, right? So if you haven't been there, I'm sure you've heard of it. I lived there for 4 years. That's where my husband was born and raised. And I'm going to tell you the story about my work there. And then we'll talk about my tips for vegan customers. How can you advocate for yourself? How can you communicate more effectively at the restaurants so that you can make sure that you feel confident that the meals you're getting are vegan and that what you're paying for is, is worth it, is worth the meal that they provide for you. So you're not just eating pasta everywhere you go, unless you want to eat pasta everywhere you go. So this is also going to be relevant if you're eating within your own neighborhood or if you're traveling abroad. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about vegan hospitality consulting. If you're interested to do this work, what my training program looks like, and the details on how to apply for that. This is not a promotion, so I'm not going to try to sell you anything at all. It's really just to let you know it's available if at some point you decide that that's what's right for you. So let's get started. This is a picture of my little family in Aruba when we first got there. Now we're a family of 4, but I moved to Aruba with this little family and we were vegan, did not have anything to eat at restaurants. This was in 2016 when we first got there. And we would go out to eat. And of course, I'm sure you can resonate with this. We would be served pasta marinara at every restaurant, no matter what the type of cuisine was, because people just didn't know what to serve vegans. And they didn't even really know what veganism was. They didn't really understand plant-based, which I think is also kind of a confusing term in many parts of the world. It means different things. And so I was starting to feel really anxious every time I would go out to eat. I would go out to eat with my family. We would have family visiting us from the US to Aruba, and they wanted to go to a nice restaurant. And I was calling restaurants and trying to figure out who could serve me something, and still just getting the same pasta and the same grilled vegetables. So I started to realize that going out to eat was not a pleasant experience. I was starting to feel anxious around social situations with food, which again, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. And yeah, so the vegan scene in my community was pretty non-existent when I got there, but it got better, so don't worry. So I started out just like you as a customer. I was just a customer at restaurants, at supermarkets, at hotels, and I had to start learning to advocate for myself to get my needs met. So my advocacy journey actually with vegan hospitality wasn't necessarily an animal rights advocacy journey. It was a vegan advocacy journey. I was trying to help myself as a vegan stay vegan, and also try to help the people in my community who wanted to be vegan stay vegan or go vegan, and also trying to help tourists to be able to continue to be vegan, continue to eat plant-based on their vacations. And so I started by learning to advocate for myself as a customer. To do that, I had to call restaurants in advance before I would go to eat there and let them know that I was vegan. And oftentimes that conversation needed to get into real detail about what is veganism and what is plant-based food. And also I would ask to speak with the chef. I'd have to figure out, where can they even source the food that I needed to eat at these restaurants. So this was my kind of unofficial start to consulting, was as a customer. And eventually I decided, okay, there's more to this, that I want to be part of a vegan community. I want to have the ability to influence and help people go vegan in this community as well. And so I did a lot of advocacy and activism before I ended up starting my business as a hospitality consultant. I started on social media. I started an Instagram called Vegan Aruba. Really simple, just to promote veganism on Aruba. And that allowed me to create community where I was and to find people who were interested in going vegan, or some people who were already vegan or trying to be. And I started this online community, but because I was living in a small island, I was able to actually take the online experience into the real world. And so people would stop me in the supermarket and say, "You're that vegan girl from the internet." And I would start to really meet people. So that was a way that I started my community building. And what I encourage you to do, if you want that kind of community and you're in a small town, or you can find like a micro community within your larger city, that you can use social media to start building community in that way and really get focused on a small part of your neighborhood so that you can build community in a micro level. So through the social media, I started to get contacted by people who were interested in what I was promoting in veganism. So my first activism experience was I was contacted by a yoga studio that said, we want you to come and use our space. We have a lot of customers that like yoga, but we don't think they understand the connection of ahimsa, nonviolence, with the movement that they're doing with their bodies. And we want them to understand the food that they're putting onto their plates. And so I did a 5-week workshop. And because I was a social worker and had experience talking to people about relationships with food, I was able to really use that experience and talk to people in a more mental health oriented way. So I did that, and it just so happened there was a couple chefs in my workshop and an owner of a restaurant. So I started to talk about hospitality and get involved with understanding the mentality of people who own restaurants. And then eventually I started to get some press involved. People who were running the newspapers were curious to hear about my story and how I was going vegan, being vegan in Aruba. A lot of people said to me, I want to be vegan, but it's not possible to be vegan here. There's not enough fresh food. It's too expensive. And we hear that in a lot of places. The culture is promoting meat, and I would be breaking from my traditions. So we hear that in a lot of different places. And now that I've worked with so many consultants all over the world, we hear the same things in every community, the barriers to people feeling like they can't go vegan or are worried about going vegan. And so I went through all that as well. And eventually I was invited to give a presentation at the National Restaurant Association, where I gave a presentation just as a customer. Here's the things I've been eating in your restaurant. I spoke to restaurant owners, chefs, and managers, and I said, here's the pictures of the 10 pasta marinaras I've eaten this month. And here's the pictures of your mislabeled menus. And here's what I recommend you do. Instead, you could label your menus properly, and you could offer creative, thoughtful dishes that mirror the traditional versions of these dishes that you have on your menu. And you could promote yourselves as vegan friendly, and you could really make a big impact. So I gave this really motivating speech. And at the end of the presentation, I had a line of restaurant owners handing me their business cards and saying, you've convinced us. We didn't even know there was a difference between vegetarian and vegan. This is amazing. We want more people to come and eat at our places. We don't know how to do this. So can you help us? And like I said, I was a social worker. I didn't have a culinary career. At the time, I was a professor at the university teaching social work and advocacy. And one restaurant owner came up to me. He was a Cuban restaurant, and he said, look, we're updating our menus this week. And if you don't come and help us figure this out, there won't be any vegan options on it. And at that point I said, okay, yes, I'm willing to help. And that was a turning point for me when I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't have to do it perfectly, and I don't even have to know what I'm doing. We're just, I have this goal. I want to help people be vegan, and I can't say no to this. And I'm sure a lot of you have had that experience where you feel like you want to say yes, as much as you possibly can, because you want to be there for the animals and for the vegans, and you just go for it. So I did, and I made a vegan menu for this restaurant. I trained the chefs and helped them source the food, and then they came out with one of the first vegan menus on the island. And it was so popular that I started getting phone calls from other restaurant owners saying, remember me from your workshop? I need help too. I want you to do this for me. And at that point, after having consulted for this one restaurant, I realized this is a lot of work. This took a lot of time. I have some level of expertise that I can offer, and I'm going to start a business so I can get paid for my work. I think it's really important as an activist in some ways to be compensated for work that you're doing that involves your level of expertise, because it just, for me at least, it allowed me to then say yes to a lot of free opportunities because I was getting compensated for what I had the expertise on, and for my time. Then every time I was offered a chance to speak at a climate protest, or I saved an animal, or things like this, like I had the time to do those things because I wasn't struggling. So I was able to start a business, and then I did a lot through this business. So I worked with so many different hotels, restaurants, created vegan menus, but not just putting food on their menu, really training their staff. So I would take chefs through the supermarket on a supermarket tour and explain to them, okay, now we're in the egg section. Do you know what goes on in the egg factories? Do you know why vegans don't want to eat eggs? And we would go through 2 hours in the supermarket talking about the vegan lifestyle and why vegans are eating these products and how to make exciting meals for vegans at their restaurants. So I trained through the the hotel association, I trained Marriott and Hyatt and Hilton and really all the hotels on the island, and also went to neighboring islands to do trainings for their hotel associations, and started to make a really major impact. I worked with the tourism board to bring in vegan influencers, social media influencers from other parts of the world, and promote the island as vegan friendly so that more vegans would come to Aruba. And it's important that when you're working with restaurants and you're telling them, okay, there's a demand for vegan food, you want to put that on your menu, that you also make sure that there really is a demand, that people are coming to eat it so that they can see success. Because a lot of times you'll see restaurants put some vegan dish on their menu, nobody knows about it, nobody eats it, and then they decide, there's nobody vegan here, and they take it off. So it was really important to me to make sure I closed the loop on that the whole relationship between my clients, the restaurant, and their customers. And once I started bringing influencers in and doing a little bit more public advocacy, I started to get messages from vegans all over the world on Instagram and Facebook asking me, how did you do this? I want to do this. I want to make my community vegan friendly. I would have people come to Aruba and be on vacation from New York and San Francisco and these major cities. And then they would email me when they got home and say, I don't understand. I live in New York City and it was more vegan friendly in Aruba. I need to do this here. I need to come back to my home and do this here. And I think it was when someone contacted me from San Francisco, and I was like, that's impossible. You must have so many vegan options. It doesn't make sense. And what they told me is that they have vegan restaurants, but they don't have mainstream vegan options where if they wanted to go out to eat with their families who were not vegan or their friend group, then they would go to these mainstream restaurants and have no options there. And so that was like the major difference of what I was working on in Aruba, was making sure that veganism was accessible throughout the hospitality scene. So once I started getting those messages and started getting on Zoom calls and having conversations with people, they were encouraging me to train people to do this work. And so I decided to start this training program, which I now have been running for 2 years, to train vegans around the world to do this work in their communities. It's a 3-month program. It's all virtual. I'll tell you more about that later, but that's what I'm doing now, as well as right now I'm living in Florida. So we moved to Florida. We accidentally moved to Florida right before the pandemic. We were visiting in February, and then March, everything got locked down, and decided we were going to stay in Florida. So that's where I live now. And I just started opening up my business to consult for larger clients. So right now I'm working with a restaurant in Switzerland. We're opening up a plant-based restaurant there. I'm consulting for a large retreat center in North Carolina, where I'm going to go and train their staff to make better plant-based options and understand the vegan customer. And so that's my current situation. In 2019, so it only took 2.5 years, Aruba was named the most vegan-friendly Caribbean island with the most vegan-friendly listings per capita. That was a pivotal moment for me in my work, realizing, wow, this little project I had going on, it became something a lot larger than I could have ever imagined. I was finding myself once I was like on a magazine that was in the airplanes, and people would come and be like, this is you in the airplanes. So it really became something spectacular. And I'm so grateful to be able to now teach this to other people on how to do this. And Shreya, I see you have some questions, so I'll take a look at that in a little while. Thank you. So what I want to do now is get into how did this happen? How can you start implementing this in your own community as a customer or as a consultant? So I must acknowledge privilege. I think that's so important to always talk about what is it that I came into the situation with as a person with a background, because I didn't come into it as a blank slate. So there was a mixture of privilege and strategy. So I had the time privilege to be able to actually do this work. I had a husband who eventually was able, well, I don't know if it's privilege, but he lost his job right around the same time that I started my business. And so I said, you know what, give me a chance. You stay home with the baby. I'm going to work. And it gave me the time privilege to be able to go out and do the work and not be home with my child full time. I had the experience and education background to work with people. So I was able to have communication with people in a really positive way and understand where people were coming from because of my social work background and my community organizing background. I had previously worked in a nutrition-based community organizing job. I also had the confidence to say yes, and the confidence that I really believed I could help people. in that moment when that Cuban restaurant owner said to me, can you help us? If I was a different person, maybe I would have said, no thanks, I can't do this. And because I've had this background of working on my mental health and building my confidence, and I was able to say yes. And I think that that is a privilege to be able to do that. And Leah has a social work too. That's amazing. So yeah, one of the things that I really work on with people in this program is also building confidence. And that's also one of the main reasons people join this program, is to build their confidence in a lot of the skills that they already have. I had the privilege of working with a small community, which I think that a lot of people have the privilege of, but sometimes we get really, we have to make a bigger impact, right? I want to change all of Chicago. And we forget that there's actually like a community of 5 streets around you that maybe has 10 restaurants that could be a great place to start, and could be an easier place to start. So yes, I had the privilege of a manageable size community. And also because I was a white American coming into this community, I was the target market of these places I was working with, because they're catering mostly to tourists. And so they valued my opinion in a deeper way, because I was able to say, look, I'm the one eating here. I'm a customer just like all your other customers. And if I like this food, probably they will too. So I was kind of like their target market. And of course, there's always right place, right time. It was just when veganism was starting to take off in other parts of the world. I was able to say, look, Aruba, you don't want to fall behind. You want to be part of this trend. And they were able to become a leader in it at the right place, right time. What I can teach, so obviously I can't teach privilege, I can teach strategy, and that's what I do teach mostly in my program. So in a moment, I'm going to share about how to create your vision and your mission. I teach a method. So I teach my high impact hospitality consulting method, which is the method that I created from my consulting projects in Aruba. And through that method, I teach people how to go take a restaurant from 0 to vegan friendly, any mainstream restaurant. I teach a positive, non-shaming approach to activism and communication. So how do we go and have conversations with restaurants without shutting them down, without making them feel like they're doing something wrong, without making them feel uncomfortable that they do have meat on the menu, or they do have animals on the menu, and calling them out on that, but be allowing them to run their business, but also producing a shared agenda to serve more plant-based eaters. And then collaboration and involvement of a variety of stakeholders. So that was always my strategy from the beginning, was really seeing, okay, who is interested in this? And I'm going to say yes to everyone. I'm going to say yes to the farm that's selling produce, and find a way to get them into the restaurants and pull them into the mission. And because I did that, when they were about to sell a sheep that they were about to slaughter, I was able to convince them not to, because I had built that relationship, and was able to change. And they created a sheep adoption program where people were donating to take care of the sheep instead. I was able to coordinate working with the tourism board and getting them involved. And once the tourism board is involved, then they have a much higher stake in what happens in the island. So there was just a lot of different stakeholders I involved. I ended up doing presentations for the government, for their social services department, for the central bank, just really anyone interested. I was going there and being like, want to hear about veganism? Here we go. And it really worked. And so that's what I teach also in my program, is to really think about who are the stakeholders. I teach public speaking, and how do you format a presentation if you were going to give a presentation to various stakeholders about veganism or about vegan hospitality. And I also had a willingness to learn on the job, which is something that I think every vegan hospitality consultant needs, because this is a brand new field. There's not a lot of people doing this work. We're all pioneers working our way to figure out how can we make the biggest impact. And so it does take a high level of willingness to do things without knowing things 100%, or without feeling like you're going to do it perfectly. So this is really what I attribute to the success of my work, the success of my program. And I also, like I said, support people with building confidence. And through this, I created a 6-week mindfulness course to help vegans build their confidence levels with hospitality consulting, entrepreneurship, and advocacy. And so through that, I also offer that as part of my hospitality program, as well as separately. All right, let me just check what Shreya's questions were, since I know they were relevant to what I was talking about before. Did you have any formal consulting training? So I would say the training I had that was most relevant, and Shreya, you know that people come into this work from all different backgrounds, but the training I had that was most relevant is that I worked for a community outreach branch of a hospital in New York City, and I was doing community and school wellness trainings. So I was running workshops on school wellness, and I was teaching a bit of nutrition and mental health related work. So I was able to work with a lot of different stakeholders in that way. And then I ended up doing some consulting work for them after I left and creating manuals for them. So I had a little bit of work with consulting. How have your trainings with staff and chefs about the why of veganism impacted them? Have any of them gone plant-based? Yes. So I once, actually one of the first chefs I worked with, he didn't really know anything about veganism or why people went vegan. And when I was sharing information about that, what really stuck with him was the environmental impact of dairy. And he didn't really understand how cows contributed to the degradation of the environment. And when I shared that with him, somehow it just resonated with him. He had 2 sons, and he said to me, I don't want to be part of that industry anymore. I'm not going to purchase or consume anything related to cows. So that included obviously beef and dairy. And he made that personal change, not in his restaurant, but just in his personal life. And while I wish, of course, he would go fully vegan, and who knows, maybe he has at the time, I don't know him anymore, but it was really interesting to see that one aspect would make a difference for somebody. And I think we all know that once you get interested or you have an entry point in one area, that it sometimes can allow you to go and get excited to do more research in other areas. All right, great. And yes, there have been other opportunities, like when I'm sharing with chefs, they'll ask me for more information. I've had servers, when I've done service trainings, I had one training where everyone was really like, what documentaries should we watch? We're so interested in this. And I would giving them a list of documentaries. So you just never know who you'll impact. I once did a supermarket training for supermarket staff, and I went back a couple days later, and 3 of the employees said to me, we've been vegan since your training. And that was because they were just so grossed out finding out about what was in their food. I explained what gelatin was and some other fining agents in wine, and they didn't know these things. And so they were so freaked out, they decided to go vegan. So you just never know what's going to impact somebody. All right, so let's get into the customer tips, because of course, not everyone wants to be a consultant. It's a lot of work. I understand that. And so we are all customers, though. We all have to eat. Hi, Tony. I'm glad that you love being vegan. That's amazing. So do I. So I'm going to share 3 tips today. So the first tip is to call restaurants in advance. And I want to share with you more details about that, what you can say and how you can make sure that you can use this strategy effectively. So this is a strategy to, of course, get a good meal, but also to inspire change, because what it does is it puts you in direct contact with a chef, and a chef has purchasing power within the industry. So they're buying all the food for the restaurant. They also have the power to influence all the other customers. So if you're able to get a vegan option, not just for yourself, but put on their menu, then you're able to influence who else is going to go to this restaurant. And I like to have a long-term vision. So if you think about the ripple effect of things, right? Let's say you have a great vegan meal at a restaurant, and let's say you then get them to put it on their menu. And let's say lots of vegans start going there. And let's say they start adding more vegan options. Maybe 10 years from now, when there's lots of restaurants flipping and becoming more vegan, this is going to be one of the first restaurants to do that, because they realize they've already built a vegan following. So really a little bit can go a long way, and it doesn't take that long. Like I mentioned, my work in Aruba, it was 2 years until Aruba was so vegan friendly that people from San Francisco were telling me they needed to come back. So, all right. You can call restaurants in advance. And what I recommend is that whoever answers the phone is not going to be the chef, probably. So you want to ask to speak to the chef. This works if you're calling a restaurant that has no vegan options on the menu. And so that you're going to need confirmation from the chef that they understand what veganism is, and they know how to make something plant-based for you at their restaurant. And so when would be a time that you might go to a restaurant like this? Probably if your family is doing a party there, if your grandparents invite you out, if someone non-vegan invites you out, you might end up at a restaurant with no vegan options or very few vegan options. I imagine if you're going out with your vegan friends, you're going to go to a vegan restaurant. So this strategy doesn't work there. But you could call a restaurant that you are going to. I recommend calling them a couple days in advance, because you want to give them time to prepare if you want it to be a thoughtful preparation. You ask to speak with the chef, and many times the chef will not be there. So all you can do is say, okay, let me leave my number and have the chef call me back. And the chef will call you back, and that way you can have a conversation about what they could make for you. So you can say, I noticed you don't have vegan options. What do you normally serve for vegans when they ask for vegan options here? When someone comes in and orders something vegan, what do you make for them? And they might say, oh, well, we put together a veggie platter. And I wouldn't stop there. So I would want to have a deeper conversation so that you can, of course, get a good meal, because we don't just want a veggie platter. And also to get the chef thinking about what does the vegan customer need? Vegan customer needs to have a similar quality experience to the traditional customer. And so recognize your language too when you're talking about customers. We want to use the word traditional for the mainstream customer. We don't want to say the normal customer, the regular customer, because we want to normalize veganism. So we want to say, okay, well, what do you serve vegan customers? And let them tell you. And then if it doesn't seem sufficient to you, then you can get into more detail. Okay, well, you're making me a veggie platter. Great. Do you have any vegan high protein sources that you could pair that with? And let them see what they can come up with and make suggestions if what they say is not sufficient. Because remember, you're paying for this food. So you might say, I notice you have black beans on the other parts of your menu. Could you maybe put that in the veggie platter? Or could you make it with barbecue sauce? You could offer some suggestions to the chef, and generally they're going to be happy to take them because that's less work for them. They don't have to think about what to serve you. And so the exciting thing about doing this is that when you get to the restaurant, then you can have a second point of contact with the chef. Your first point of contact is the phone call. You get to the restaurant and you have this meal that they've prepared for you. And if you want to take this further as an activism strategy, then you can take a picture of the food and you can use social media to promote it. This does a couple things. Number one, it makes the chef feel like they did something great, and that's exciting for the chef. They get an endorphin boost, and when they feel good about something they did for a vegan customer, they're likely to do it again, right? So we want to give people positive experiences with vegan customers. The other thing it does is it offers an opportunity to get the community involved in advocacy. So let's say you got a pretty good meal and you post about it online and you tag the restaurant and the chef, then you can ask people in your community to comment on your post and say, who would like to see this on their permanent menu? Comment if this looks good to you, and get 10 people in your network. Tell them, I just posted, I need your help. Get 10 people to comment, this looks great, and tag the restaurant. You should put this on your menu. And then the chef sees that and maybe tries to put it on their menu, right? Because they know that now they have an audience for it. If they don't see it, that's okay. You can message the chef or message the restaurant a week later. Hey, did you see my post? Look how many people commented on this post. All these people want this food. What do you think? Would you consider it? So it's a conversation starter. What you can also do when you're eating at the restaurant, if the meal is good, ask if the chef can come out. Say to the server, hey, I want to thank the chef for making this meal for me. Could the chef come say hello? And I know things are different maybe in your community with COVID now. Like sometimes chef doesn't want to come out of the kitchen, but pre-COVID times, chefs were really excited about meeting customers, and maybe things have normalized by this point. But if you get to meet the chef, you thank them, and you, again, another chance to give them a positive experience with a vegan customer. And you can also offer to take a picture with them. If you find my Instagram and scroll 4 years ago to the beginning, you'll see a lot of pictures of me with random chefs that I didn't know personally, but I took pictures with because I was going to then post on Instagram and showcase that this chef was endorsing what I was endorsing, essentially, that this chef was partnered with me, made a vegan meal, and was willing to do that, and congratulate them for it. So it's really nice to involve the chef as much as you can in this storyline you're creating about this restaurant becoming vegan friendly. So that's tip number one. And tip number two is we want to give honest feedback when we do not get what we were expecting, when we do not have a good meal. We want to make sure restaurants have an opportunity to be in dialogue with a vegan customer in a positive way, but in a way that they can actually improve things. So, all right, if you order something and the chef makes it like you called them in advance, they made you something and it wasn't good, then you really need to be honest about that, because otherwise they're going to think it was good and they're going to give that to other vegans, and then no one's going to come back and they're going to think that there's no demand for vegan food, which we don't want. So what the phrase I like to use is, if someone says, "How was your food?" Of course, we want to, it was fine, thanks, good. Okay, and you run out the door, right? We don't want to do that. That's not helpful. But it does feel awkward sometimes to be like, the food wasn't good. So what I like to focus on is what would have been better. So I would say, to be honest, I was expecting, and then share what you would have liked to see the dish have. I was expecting there were to be a bigger portion size of the tofu. I was expecting it to be seasoned differently. I was expecting the couscous to, I don't know, be more moist, whatever it was. That was a weird example, but it could be anything. You just want to share with them what the food should have been like for your vegan palate, without saying, you did this wrong, this was terrible, here's what I was expecting, and let them say, oh yeah, that sounds better. That sounds good. And then if you're speaking to someone who is actually like not going to make decisions at the restaurant, a server, a busser, you can ask to speak with a manager or the chef about it. So you can call over the manager and say, actually, I'd love to just share my feedback with the manager, because maybe it could help things be better for vegans here in the future. And really, everything needs to be positive. You want them to have a positive customer experience, even if the food was terrible. I know this doesn't feel good, doesn't feel great, but we have to remember our long-term advocacy goals here. So call over the manager, say to the manager, hey, the server was just asking me about the food. I shared a little bit. I'd love to share it with you too. Would you be interested to hear? Always ask permission before you give feedback. That's also another strategy to get people to give buy-in to hear what you have to say. All right, before I get to the third one, I see question, advice on navigating discomfort if dining around folks eating animals. Okay, all right, let me get to the third tip and then I'll go into that. All right, know the power of a review. So if you've ever traveled as a vegan, you probably already know the power of your review, because I'm guessing you have looked on TripAdvisor or Google Reviews or Happy Cow and looked to see where you're going to eat when you go to this new community, or maybe even in your own community, you're looking up reviews to see where you can eat, where you can find vegan food, not just vegan food, but good vegan food. You deserve to eat well and you're paying for the food. And so I'm guessing everyone here has looked at a review site to find what they're going to eat, what they can expect. All right. Now, I don't know if anyone has ever left a bad review for a restaurant, but you do see bad reviews sometimes when you start to look at reviews. So there is, in my opinion, there's only one reason to leave a bad review, and that is to make sure that that restaurant does not serve any more vegan guests. And that can be a good thing, right? So if the restaurant, if you believe they're actually not capable of serving vegans, if they're making egregious mistakes like putting chicken in the salad when you've asked for tofu and they don't apologize for it or take it back, if it's a horrendous experience, they probably shouldn't be serving any more vegan guests. But the problem here is that, from my experience, most restaurants, they do want to do a good job. They do want to serve vegan guests. And once you leave that bad review, then they're not going to want to serve vegans anymore. They're going to stop getting vegans, obviously, because the vegans are going to see the bad reviews and not want to go to this restaurant. And then the few vegans they get, they're going to have bad experiences. The restaurant's already going to think, oh, I'm nervous around vegans. They give us bad reviews. And so really the best thing we can do is give good reviews to restaurants that have potential. So we want to be encouraging and really think about this from a psychological perspective. We want to tell people what they could do better, not what they did wrong. When people feel punished, they feel shame and they don't want to have more interactions with that person or that group of people that made them feel shame. That's not a great feeling. And so, Leah, you went to Chili's and they dumped bacon on your rice. Yeah, so that's a chain restaurant. Give the chain restaurants all the bad reviews you want. So I'm talking about like the family-owned restaurants that actually you could communicate with directly and make a difference. So what I recommend is, if you have a horrendous experience, like Leah just shared, you got bacon in your rice and they're rude about it and they don't care about vegans, and yeah, leave a bad review. Vegans should not be going there. But if you just had a vegan meal and it wasn't so tasty, I wouldn't put a bad review on their website and say, this vegan food isn't so tasty. What I would recommend is giving them a decent review, 5 stars. Thank you so much for making this food. It was great. Next time, I would love to see the beans be more spicy, or whatever you think should be better about the food, or give us a bigger portion. Give them a good review with the critical feedback within the text of the review. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing that and you just don't think they deserve 5 stars, then just email the manager, call the manager and say, look, I was going to leave a review for you online. To be honest, it was going to be a 4-star review. And I think that you could, I know you probably want 5-star reviews. So I thought better to just give you a call and share my feedback directly so you could make improvements if you wanted to. Right. So we can be honest with people and in a nice way, and we can let them know, look, this wasn't a 5-star experience, but I believe that you can make it that way. And would you like to hear what I have to say about that as a vegan customer? And if they want to do better, they will be interested in what you have to say and they will make changes. And if they don't, then they're going to eventually get bad reviews from people who didn't attend this workshop and don't know that trick. So we have to only do our best, what we can do and what we feel comfortable with. All right. The question was advice on navigating discomfort if dining around folks eating animals. Yeah, it is something we may all struggle with. Yes. So I think that it can be an individual situation to figure out your boundaries and your limits on to what extent you do want to engage in that dining experience with people eating animals. And what I like to tell people, because what I see a lot in like the vegan forums on Facebook is people feel, I know some people take the Liberation Pledge, which is fantastic. And I think some people feel like it has to be all or nothing. Either I dine around people eating animals or I don't dine around people eating animals. And in my experience, at least that hasn't been true for me. What's been true for me is that my tolerance level is different on a daily basis. Some days I can tolerate it and some days I cannot. And so for me, it isn't helpful to say, okay, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to go to a party where people are eating animals, because there might be a day when I do feel comfortable going to that party and my relationships are important to me. And so there also may be certain people in my life that eat animals in a more grotesque way, if you can imagine that. Like they're eating the wing and they're saying, this is so delicious. Oh, you cooked it so nice. It's amazing. And then I have other people in my life who are more discreet and order their shrimp and don't say anything about it because they know it turns me off. And so it really depends on knowing who you're about to dine with and what that experience, anticipating what that experience might be like, and trying to check in with yourself and your own mental health, your own level of tolerance for that kind of experience. But it's a personal choice and it's not the same for everyone. And then, of course, once you're in that situation, continue to check in with yourself, because there are ways you can modify the experience in the moment. So if someone is eating meat and they're ordering something and it doesn't feel good to you, then maybe you can position yourself on the opposite side of the table from them. Or, maybe you can change the conversation if somebody mentions talking about something that, doesn't seem delicious. We've also, in my family, we've set boundaries or made suggestions to our family to help them enjoy meals with us. So like we've said, can you please not, like, if you want to eat your meat, go for it, but do not say it's delicious in front of us. Like, do not talk about it in front of us. We don't want to hear people commenting on how good this animal flesh is. And for the most part, people around us have been receptive to that. So we've also, like with my daughter, before she really understood that people were eating meat, it didn't really make sense. So we would put her at the opposite end of the table than the people who were eating the meat. And we'd have like the vegan section of the table and the meat section of the table. So we would never place meat in front of her or in front of us. So there's small modifications you can make to make yourself feel comfortable with whatever works best for you. All right, and thank you for all the questions in the chat. You're welcome to continue to post questions in the chat and I will answer them as we go. I have a couple more slides. I want to give you one more bonus tip, and that's to use clear communication with every staff member. So you don't have to only speak to the chef. You can influence anyone in the restaurant because they're all people and each person has a network and each network has a ripple effect. So if you maybe, you don't have to say, I'm going to turn this person vegan and from this little interaction, but you're planting a seed and that gets to spread. And if they're working in a hospitality, then it's possible they're not going to only work in this one place. Maybe next year they're in a different restaurant and they influence that other restaurant as well. But what you want to do is really be clear about what you are saying and what you're asking for so that they know there's a demand for vegan food. So a lot of times when I'm working with restaurants, I'll ask them, how many vegan meals are you serving a week? And they'll say, we don't really know because people aren't asking for vegan food. So then I'll have to say, okay, how many people asked for pasta without the cheese this week? And they'll say, oh yeah, we get that request a lot. So they're serving vegans and they don't even know it. And so we want them to know it, because when they hear the word vegan and then they start to know what that means, then they're more likely to start adding vegan food to their menu. So instead of just saying, can you make the pasta without the cheese and the butter, you could be more clear. You could say, I would like the pasta, but could you make it vegan? And then look for some recognition in the other person's face that they know what that means. And say, do you know what vegan means? Can you explain to me how you would do this vegan? And if they don't know, then you can say, if you made it vegan, it would be no cheese or butter. And then you can follow up and say, are there any other non-vegan ingredients in this dish that I should know about? Like, for example, when I was working with restaurants, I was seeing them cooking their vegetable soup in chicken broth. And it just said vegetable soup on the menu, and no one would know unless they asked. They were making sauces with chicken broth, and they were making rice in chicken broth. So there were a marinara sauce with chicken broth. I mean, I learned a lot of things working with restaurants, questions I would not have known to ask. And so, and like breads, you know, the things in the breads, a lot of times restaurants didn't even know the ingredients in their bread because they were not making it on site. So the more questions you can ask, then you also are getting them to learn about their own food. So maybe the server doesn't really know how the rice is made, and they have to go find out at that moment because you've asked, and then they know now how to be more clear for future customers. And you can ask follow-up, which sauces on your menu are vegan? Okay, so what would you recommend for a vegan customer? And really just use the word vegan as much as you can and get them to remember you so that they go back to the manager and say, hey, we just had this like vegan person who wanted all these things that we don't have. And the more times they have that experience, the more they're going to say, okay, we need a consultant, or we need to make a change on our menu. All right. Another thing you can do is also, if they seem receptive, you can make suggestions. So things I would suggest right away to restaurants would be to label their menus. So you can say to the server or the manager, look, it is really hard for a vegan customer to understand what you're serving here. I don't know what ingredients are in the food. Can you label, maybe you want to label your menu so that we don't have to have this conversation again next time. So labeling the menu is a really good start for restaurants that don't have a lot of vegan options, or have maybe vegetarian options that are not super clear about whether they're vegan. All right. I see, Shreya, you've been on the phone for almost an hour tracing down the bread source of the restaurant to check the ingredients list. Yeah. I mean, it's very complicated when restaurants don't know what's in their own food, and that's really where the need for consulting comes in. So we're going to talk a little bit about consulting, and then I know Shreya wants to share her experiences, and then if there's any more questions, we can get into that. So the main difference between your experience as a vegan customer versus a vegan consultant is this. When a restaurant says they would like to add more vegan options, as a customer, you go home and you hope for the best and you hope they follow through. And as a consultant, you can offer to help. So it's really the same kind of experience when you go eat, but you get to take that conversation further. And they say, oh, this is great advice. I want to label my menu. I want to add a vegan option. As a consultant, you can say, great, here's my card, or give me your information and I'll follow up with you next week. So the way that I recommend you getting started, if you do want to get into this work in your community, is number one, get clear on your vision. So your vision and your mission are a little bit different. You want to start with the vision. So what do you envision for your community? And you can use your imagination. What would it look like in your ideal community? What would be a wonderful outcome for this? And for me, my vision was Aruba is the most vegan-friendly Caribbean island. And everything I did was leading with that vision. So I started, before it even happened, I was saying, Aruba could be the most vegan-friendly island. There's so much potential here. When there was no vegan options, I was like, we could do this. I see this vision in my head, and I want to bring other people into my vision. And so I would share this vision. Aruba could do this. And then it turned into Aruba is becoming the most vegan-friendly island. Look, it's happening, whether you like it or not. So join us. It's becoming. So went from we could do this to it's becoming, as we started getting more vegan options in the supermarkets and in the restaurants. And then finally it became Aruba is the most vegan-friendly Caribbean island. Look at all the vegan options. So my vision really transformed and grew as I was doing the work. But I needed to lead with my vision in order for other people to buy into it and to be curious about what was happening. And that really is what also ignited the fire under the press, because they were like, who is this woman who thinks Aruba could be a vegan-friendly island? We don't even have vegan options here. What is she talking about? And so they wanted to talk to me to hear about what it was all about and how we were going to do that. Just to give you an idea of how vegan friendly Aruba is right now, I live in Florida and my mother-in-law came to visit last week. She lives in Aruba, and we literally asked her to bring us vegan products from Aruba because there are things we can't get here. So she brought us like the best vegan deli meats, all sorts of vegan chocolates, vegan white chocolate, and all these things are just in the supermarket. She didn't have to source them special online. She just went to her local supermarket and bought all these things and brought them to us. And when I first moved to Aruba, I was coming to Florida, packing suitcases full of stuff from Trader Joe's and bringing it because we didn't have anything. So we didn't have any vegan meats or vegan cheeses or any specialty products. So things have changed so much. So a vision alone, though, is not what makes a change. Me just going around acting like the town lunatic saying we're going to be vegan friendly didn't necessarily make the full change. I needed a mission in order to accomplish my vision and bring it about. And so for me, I like to think of the vision is the what, like what do we want to happen? And the mission is the how. How can we make it happen? And so my mission was to make the vegan lifestyle both acceptable and accessible on Aruba. So acceptable meaning that when I was telling people I'm vegan, that they weren't like, oh, that's weird. What's that? That acceptable would mean when people heard I was vegan, they would be like, yeah, that's cool. That's normal. Yeah. It was just a normal thing, which of course took time to transform. And so I wanted people to feel accepted when they went vegan because I knew there was a stigma. People were afraid to go vegan because they thought they wouldn't be accepted by their families who are very traditional. And I want it to be accessible, meaning that I want anyone to be able to walk into a supermarket anywhere and be able to find vegan food. And I want it to be affordable. And I want there to be options at the restaurants that are targeting the locals and the ones that are targeting the tourists and in different price ranges. And so really those were my focuses. And at this point now in my work globally, that is still my focus, but it's just expanded regionally. So my focus is to make the vegan lifestyle acceptable and acceptable now in the world through my work in hospitality. I think hospitality plays such a role in this because people need to eat 3 times a day, potentially more. And so we are all engaging with the hospitality industry, whether it's purchasing food at a supermarket or going to a restaurant or going to a hotel and eating on vacation. And so this industry plays a really big role in what happens for vegans and for a future vegan world. So when you start to think of your vision and your mission, you can start to share that with other people. And that's where you're going to start seeing what kind of stakeholders are going to be interested in this work in your community. So you can share on social media, you can share with local press, you can start to contact press if you have a vision and a mission and let them know what you're doing and let them know to look out for you and to follow you. I have consultants in my network who have graduated from the program and already been on TV, on radio, on newspapers, magazines, literally before they even start consulting because they are sharing their vision and their mission, and that in itself is newsworthy. I had a consultant in Arkansas who she was featured in a business newspaper before, like right when she just started her business. She didn't even have a client because they were like, this is such a cool business and we want to feature her. And so the more you can share with other people what you're doing, the more excited people are going to be to join you if they have a role. It's also important to give people a role in your mission. So if your mission is to do this, then when you go to a supermarket, explain to them how they fit into this mission. How are they going to help make this lifestyle more accessible and acceptable? And similarly with restaurants, like you can say to a chef, if you put vegan labels on your menu, you're doing your role in normalizing this cuisine because people can choose the food that they want without asking 100 questions to the server. And so you can use your mission to explain to the people why and how they can get involved. All right, questions. I see 2 questions. All right. Do you go into restaurant kitchens? If so, do you need some sort of food handling certification or do chefs allow you to do so without it? Okay, great question. And so I do address this in the training program. And what I say is that, no, I don't have a certification. I've never needed one. I'm working with large clients now and no one's ever asked me for one. I think that's because I'm not serving customers. So I'm not doing any food handling of food that's actually going to be served. I do go into the restaurant kitchens and I only do that for training purposes. And so that is built into my contract that I'm only there for training purposes. Another reason why it's difficult to do chef handling food licensing is that if you're consulting outside of your region, then food certifications are extremely local. So if I'm going to get licensed in Florida, it's not going to be relevant in New York. If I'm licensed in Aruba, it's not going to be relevant in North Carolina. And so it's very localized and focused really for people who are working permanently in a certain location. And so none of the consultants that have been part of my network have ever told me that they needed it. But what I say in the training is, if you ever need it, let me know so I can at least tell people that now you need it. Another thing is, it's pretty easy to get. It's usually just an online exam and a health checkup. So if someone does want to work with you and does require it, then you can just tell them you'll get it for them. All right. Other question is, pots, pans, utensils, and other cookware shared with animal flesh. How is this addressed? Most kitchens don't have separate prep stations. Yeah, great. So when I work as a consultant, I train I do the front of house and back of house training. When we do back of house training in the kitchen, we do create proper protocols for both allergies and for vegan guests. And so any restaurant that I've personally worked with is not merging equipment. And what that means is, if we're doing fried food on the menu, then they are using separate frying oil for their vegan food. So sometimes restaurants will say, oh, that's going to be such a burden, it's so hard. And when you actually work with them, you can explain how it's really simple. So they're probably frying their French fries. They're probably, like, if they're making a lot of fried food, they're making a lot of French fries, right? So the French fry fryer can become the vegan fryer, because we want the French fries to be vegan too. And then they're making a bunch of vegan fried stuff. Great, cook them with the French fries. Then if they're cooking meat, then they just need the separate fryer for the animals. They don't need the separate fryer for the vegan guests. And that's another fun thing to do, is flip the script on them. So it's your animal products that need the separate fryer. You're cooking mostly vegan stuff, and you're just cooking it in animal fried oil, which doesn't make any sense. And so we want to remind them, okay, French fries should be vegan. They can be accessible to everyone. Let's use the main fryer for that and for the vegan stuff. Another thing that you can do these days is, if they have a small vegan menu or one vegan fried option on their menu, they could get an air fryer that they put on the counter, and they just do it every now and then when someone orders it. They don't need to redesign their kitchen to include vegan guests on their menu. So that's with frying. And if they're doing grilling, what I do with places that have only one grill is we clear a portion of the grill and we use that for the vegan food. So it really depends on the size of the restaurant and the size of the menu that you're creating for them. So if we're doing a small vegan menu, probably only 1 or 2 items are actually going to be grilled, and one is going to be fried and one is going to be raw. And so really, how many times are they going to get an order for the grilled vegan tofu? A couple times a day. And so what we do is we just clear a square of the grill and we say, this is the vegan section, and you clean it every night, and this is where you're going to cook the vegan food. And so it might be on the same grill, but it's in a different area, and it's cleaned. So that's an option for them. And then we also do separate cutting boards. So the nice thing about kitchens is that they already use separate cutting boards to avoid cross-contamination because of foodborne illnesses. So there are, for example, there might be green cutting boards that are used for produce, for vegetables. And so those would just be the designated cutting boards for any of the vegan plant-based ingredients. The only time we have to worry about cross-contamination is if we're doing a gluten-free and vegan menu, because they would have a gluten-free cutting board, a vegan one, but we need to merge that for the vegan gluten-free customers. And so that's the only time when you would suggest they have another cutting board color that is just for the gluten-free and vegan items. All right. And also we put allergy disclaimers on their menus. So if they're doing gluten-free, it's important to have an allergy disclaimer. If they are serving gluten in the restaurant kitchen itself, it'll never be 100% gluten-free or appropriate for people with celiac. So they do need an allergy disclaimer on their menu, which is something you could suggest to them as a customer or as a consultant. Okay, how do you come up with a rate for your services? So I would get into more detail about that in the program, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the program right now. But what I could suggest to you really simply is that you want to think about what your time is worth to you and start hourly. So if your time is worth $100 an hour, then estimate, do your first project, see how long it takes you. 30 hours, let's say, for your first consulting project, then you're charging $3,000 for your project. And so there's always going to be a trial and error with figuring out how long things take you and how much you feel your time is worth when you start a new job. But the exciting thing about working for yourself is that you get to adjust as you please. So my first client, I charged a base rate, and then I realized, wait, I need to make more. So my next client, I charged more, and I just kept increasing it until I found the rate that felt appropriate for me. All right, so we're going to talk briefly. I just have a few slides about the consultant training and certification. If anyone's interested, you're welcome to apply, and I'll tell you how to do that. So the training that I offer, it's based around 12 live virtual training sessions, and I offer it every couple of months. So it's usually like 3 times a year. It's very small, so there's only 10 people in every cohort. I cannot do more because what we do is 2-hour trainings every week, and if I had more than 10 people, we'd have a lot of more questions and we'd be on Zoom for way too long, and so we do 10 people at a time. The time zones vary, so lately I've been doing the calls on Sundays, so depending on where you live, it will depend on whether the time is going to fit your schedule, and so I vary them based on cohorts. You also get 3 private coaching sessions with me during the 12 weeks of the training, and during that time we talk in detail about your specific plans as an entrepreneur and an activist, and really what you want to do with this work. And then we have daily communication through an app. You get handouts and templates and a master training manual for everything that you'll learn. So you learn how to evaluate a restaurant's menu. You'll learn how to do kitchen trainings, service trainings, how to develop recipes for restaurants, how to write up menus and label the menus, and how to do the marketing for your clients. You'll also be eligible to apply to be a certified vegan consultant, which is the certification that my company offers after you graduate. And you'll also receive the mindfulness course, because that's, like I shared, the confidence piece and the ability to use mindfulness practice to enhance your skills as an entrepreneur was really essential to my success. And then you'll be part of our alumni network, which is now about over 60 people in 20 different countries and 19 US states, and all people that have the same kind of mission to make veganism accessible and acceptable in their community. All right, and this is the framework. So it's around 3 different sections. The first few weeks is around understanding what you're doing in this work. So what does it mean to be a vegan hospitality consultant? What are some of the issues that the hospitality industry is facing, and how are you in a position to help them solve those problems? We talk about strategies for client outreach. So how do you figure out which restaurants you want to work with and connect with them? And we get all the framework down to setting up your business. So contracting your clients, invoicing your clients. We might talk about developing the rate for your services, and also work through the legal aspect of actually starting a business in whatever country you are starting your business. The heart of the program, the main part, is the high impact hospitality consulting method, how to take your clients from zero to vegan friendly. So you learn all the skills that you would need in order to actually work with a client and make that transformation with them. And then toward the end, we also talk about more activism you can do in your community to increase the demand for vegan food. Because of course we want to have people in the community who are eating at these restaurants that you work with. We talk about how to train supermarkets, and we do a lot of group sharing so that you can learn from all the other people in your cohort and hear about what's going on for them. So I actually have a training coming up starting in about a month from now. Unfortunately, I only have 1 spot left in that training. So I feel kind of bad like saying that, but I only have 1 spot left. I have 9 people who are reserved. After this training, I will do another one, maybe around November. So what I encourage you to do, if this seems really important to you and you want to have a conversation with me about whether this is a good fit for you, then I encourage you to go to my website and submit an application. The application is 7 questions about yourself, your background, your interest, your goals. And what that does is it guides our conversation. So I do an interview with everyone who applies and who seems serious. And we have an hour-long talk to talk about your goals and whether the program is right for you, and really figure out if it makes sense for you to join before I offer you a spot. Like I said, I only have 10 spots per cohort. I also like to vary the cohorts as far as location. And so if I have someone already accepted from your location, if I say there's no spot for you, it doesn't mean that you're not good enough or something. It just might be, I have someone already in the cohort from your location. And then I would ask you to apply for the next cohort. So you would just go to the website, and I'm going to just put it in the chat box right now. So here's let me see. Here's the direct link to the application. But if you just go to veganhospitality.com and you click on our programs, click Become a Vegan Consultant, you will see all the information. You can download the brochure, you can access the application. Oh, and I think I didn't mention in the last slide. So the tuition is $14.97 for the 3 months. I offer payment plans and I really work with people. So if this is not doable for you to do like a 5-month payment plan, I've had people who've taken an entire year to pay me, and that's totally fine. I want it to be accessible. And so I never want the tuition to be the reason someone doesn't apply. If you feel like this is really important to you and you want to do this and you are not able to just dump $1,500 into my website right now, that is okay. We will work it out. And so please don't hesitate to apply. All right. That is everything for me, but I think before we do more questions, I want to give Shreya a chance to share her story. And I know we have about 20 minutes left, which is perfect. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Shreya, are you ready to go? So she has her video off. Let's see, okay, let me stop the share then. I'm going to put myself on mute as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just stepped out a bit because we're about to head out. To those who don't know, I moved to Chicago and I'm getting ready to set up. So it's kind of a crazy day, but I'm excited I could make some time to chat a little here today. And yeah, so as some of you here know, I'm Shreya. I'm also an AAM mentor, but also I think my journey into being active for the animals had a lot to do with my taking the vegan hospitality course with Meredith. And I call Meredith my fairy god mentor, and I will never get tired of calling her that. So I think it's just coming full circle that I'm in a mentorship program and I get to work with Meredith in this capacity, because she's just been such a life-changing presence in my life outside, not just professionally, but personally as well. So I came into this course because I apologize for all the noise. I am in a noisy hotel. So I came into doing vegan hospitality consulting because I really wanted to help restaurants step it up and do a lot of the work that Meredith was doing. And I came across this course when I was looking into specifically consulting, an equivalent of a consulting firm, but that specifically works with restaurants. And that's how I came across the course. And I took the course, and it is one of the best things I've ever done. I know we're not necessarily here to promote the course in and of itself, but it was just very life-changing in that I met a community, I met a family that I didn't realize I was missing in my life, and people who really shared this mission. And it inspired me to go out and seek more of this community, which is how I now came across my AAM family as well. So it's inspired me to put myself out there in a way that I never thought I would, on social media, or just going out and talking to people, being more outgoing, and also being recognized in St. Louis, where I was living previously. I would go to restaurants and people would come up to me and be like, "Hey, you're the vegan hospitality person, right?" And I was like, "Am I an influencer?" Like, it's kind of cool just to have that recognition. And I started my consulting service called Nourish by Shreya, which and the reason why I chose Nourish was because to me, veganism, Nourish, I wasn't looking at it so much from a physical health standpoint, but from more of a mental and emotional health, and how this lifestyle and this community, outside of all of the horrors that we have to confront on a day-to-day basis, when it comes to what happens to the animals, it's nourished my soul in a way that I met the people who are also fighting the good fight with me, and I felt very fulfilled in that sense. So that's sort of why I chose that name, but I also wanted to bring that to restaurants and explain that to restaurants, and never compromise on putting the animals first when I talk to people. So I did have the opportunity when the pandemic was sort of easing a bit, to work with a tea merchant. It's a British themed tea cafe in St. Louis called London Tea Merchant. And I helped them put together a vegan afternoon tea service, and it has been doing well ever since. And I've got a lot of folks reaching out to me, thanking me for that, for working with them. And I got to chat with the managers who were vegetarian or, plant forward, and who really understood, but they didn't make a lot of the logical connections with like, oh, the vegetarian items could just be made vegan by default. And in fact, a lot of these suggestions, as I was talking them through some ideas, they came up with that themselves. They made that connection themselves. Like, wait, why have a vegetarian item and a vegan item when we can just make them both one and the same? And they eventually added a lot of their items to their everyday default cafe menus, which is really cool to see. So it was a wonderful experience, but I also realized that with the course that I took with Meredith, there's also opportunities to get creative in what you want to do. It doesn't only have to be, I'm only going to work with restaurants, or I'm only going to work with grocery stores. So for me, what I wanted, and I started participating in a lot of these protests at restaurants, right? We see people serving the low-hanging fruit of animal flesh that we say, like veal and foie gras. For us, it's all oppression, all cruelty, where we don't put them on a scale. But when we're dealing with conventional society, there is that hierarchy that we're navigating, but it's also a good way in. And so I've seen people protesting either that, or people protesting in chain restaurants. And then I see a lot of groups like PETA and Mercy for Animals, the Better Food Foundation, all of them doing some really important work and campaigns to help them either add more vegan options to their menus or remove certain animal items from their menus. So I figured this would be a good way for me to also participate in these protests, but also come in with a solution. So it's not just, I'm going to come in and yell at you for doing something wrong, but we're also here offering this person who's trained to help you do what's right. So I'm working on pivoting a little bit towards consulting with other animal advocacy groups, and so I don't have to worry about coming in the whole way, like, okay, I got to advocate for the animals, but I also got to be kind to them. And I also got to say this in a very polite way but I want to be very unapologetically animal rights. So yeah, I don't have to worry about all of that, but I could still just come in like, hey, I am working with I'm not working with this group at the moment, but just off the top of my head, just to give an example, like I'm working with Mercy for Animals on this campaign, and we are urging XYZ company to drop this item, but we have someone who can help you work on curating a more plant-friendly option, plant-forward option, and come at it with the messaging that they see fit for the group that they're working with. So I figured this would be a great opportunity to be more flexible with the people I work with. So either it's going to be restaurants or catering companies, or I've been or providing workshops with a lot of these larger animal rights organizations. They do have volunteer groups and students who want to do restaurant advocacy. So similar to the workshop that Meredith gave here, doing something similar for students who might want to do that as well. So I'm thinking of how I can be a lot more, and not to say that this is, vegan hospitality is not a form of activism. I think it's a very powerful form of activism, and it's what got me to be unapologetic and brave enough to pick up a megaphone and yell at people. So I think it does, but it's also taught me that there is a time and a place and a space for certain kinds of actions. And if I want to go into a restaurant and say, hey, this is like, there's a better way, I would love to do that, but also coming in with the resources with other groups, and wanting to empower other students to find that unapologetic person in them who really is there to come out and speak their truth, and also and make change, because we can sit here all day talking amongst ourselves, but we are also here because we are wanting to change the world, and we are part of, we're going out there using our own skills in very different ways. And if anything, this course taught me to think outside of the box of just food, and also because some people, who they have a complicated relationship with food and their body image. So how can we do that? And so that was actually an opportunity for me to connect with some eating disorder centers that are not that great with catering to ethical vegans, and still viewing veganism as a diet and as a restrictive lifestyle, and getting to chat with them to see that, hey, that's not the case, and there is an ethical underlying belief. And I had the opportunity to chat with one of the leaders in the space who actually advocated for welcoming vegans who really needed care into treatment. It's a facility called Alsana, Alsana, Alsana. And I chatted with them, and I got to interview them about how they started implementing or bringing in more vegan friendly options, and they were wanting to improve that a little bit. So I just gave them some tidbits on product sourcing. So there are certain things that, if there are ways to help people be vegan and not feel like their ethics have to be compromised in order to seek the care that they need. And so little stuff like that you really start to think about, because you have your own unique stories to bring to what void you wish was filled when you were seeking out the help you needed. So that it really got me to think outside the box a bit. And I've connected with so many fantastic people, and I know some folks here are familiar with Vegan FTA. Jackie and Gareth were actually in the same cohort of the vegan hospitality training that I took, and it was really cool to connect with them, and then connect with them as activists as well. And we've really created a wonderful network of people, and it's despite the distance, it doesn't feel like we're all far away. It's like they're all my people, and I really love that. So that's just my experience with hospitality and Meredith. And I will say the incorporating mindfulness into the training was just, it's so wonderful. And I will, like, every Sunday, which was when our classes were, it was my favorite day ever. I would look forward to it. And I was telling Meredith and Michelle this earlier, that literally the last day I felt that gut-wrenching emptiness in my stomach. It's like, oh, I'm gonna miss this class so much, because it was something that, like, it got me through the winter blues of, like, the gloomy weather. It was Sunday and I'm gonna see my people. So it was a spectacular time, and I'm just so grateful that that my life has changed in the best possible way, and I found a great community. And Meredith is just she's the best. I can keep gushing about Meredith, but I'm just very thankful for all that she's doing, and of all the folks she's inspired, and all the amazing work that everybody else is out there doing. And some folks do culinary work, which Sea Shepherd, and some folks are doing, like, writing cookbooks, some are offering personal training. So it's really there is no limit, because we're all plant-powered animal rights activists. So there's really no stopping us, and we know that. So
Shreya, I want to thank you for sharing that experience. And I loved hearing about what you're doing with it now and what your mission is, because this is, like, just what I talked about, having that vision, but then also having the mission of how you want to make that impact. And it can be so unique to you. And I also want to let everyone know that you host the podcast for AAM, and that you did with Trey, right? And you did a interview with me last year. And so if people want to hear more from us, I don't know, maybe you're sick of us, but it was an awesome podcast. We talked more about mindfulness and mindfulness strategies for activism. And I loved the conversation. So they can find that on the Animal Liberation Hour podcast.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. You can even hear about Meredith's very interesting story into veganism. And yeah, the
True,
mindfulness element is really powerful too.
Thank you. So does anyone have any final questions before we go for today? You're welcome to put it in the chat box or just turn on your mic and ask.
Also, heads up, I am going to be turning my video off again because I'm going to head out, but I will be listening in. And if anyone has any questions, like, yeah, anything about my experience taking the course further, feel free to reach out to me. But yeah,
Great.
thank you. But I'll be here on the call, so I'm just going to.
Okay, bye, Shreya.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If you want to ask it in person rather than the chat, you can just hit the hand raise icon right now. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Meredith, that was so wonderful. I can't thank you enough. Really so important as veganism's on the rise. An under spotlighted area of activism, really. Got some thank yous here in the chat. Thank you, thank you. But any further questions? Then Meredith, do you have any final words before I just make
I just want everyone to know you can reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram, my vegan hospitality Instagram. I'll put it in the chat. It's vegan.hospitality at Instagram. And then my personal is Meredith Marin. You will see probably a lot of pictures of my baby because I just had my second child 2 months ago. But you're welcome to message me and I always respond. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or just want to chat and be connected.
And if anybody else wants to share their Instagram handles, et cetera, in the chat for all of us, feel free to do that.
Great
And
idea.
you can always reach out to me as well and to Animal Activism Mentorship for anything that you're missing, any information.
Thank you so much for organizing this. This is awesome. And I look forward to sharing the recording. So I know you have some announcements. So I think there's no questions and anyone could just reach out to me directly if they have any at this point.
So just a couple of announcements then, really just about the upcoming workshops, because in addition to this workshop today, AAM provides monthly 2 to 3 times a month workshops covering a wide variety of topics. On August 4th is our Fur-Free Future workshop. On August 18th is a Kinder Kaporos workshop. On August 25th is an insider look at the poultry industry. On September 20th is our Animal Advocacy Using Social Media workshop, and more workshops to be announced. These are all listed on our social media. We also have a couple large in-person event announcements that are coming up. All activists at all levels of experience are welcome to the Aam Chicago Convergence 2022. It's a 10-day animal rights activism event, largely focused on the fur industry. And those dates are July 29th through August 7th. You can come for any or all of the dates. And you can find that, and you'll need to register in advance. You'll find that on our social media. And the AAM Ohio occurrence is also a live in-person activism event, 3 days, September 2nd through 4th, taking place in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, so thank you all for being here. Thank you, Meredith and Shreya, for your time and wisdom. Thank you, everyone, for the work you're doing for the animals of the world. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee or to get involved with AAM, please reach out to any AAM mentor or check our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. In the meantime, we'd like to add you to our email newsletter list. You can also message me your email if you'd like to be added to our bi-monthly newsletter list with lots of all the announcements, workshops will come through that to your inbox as well. So let us know how you enjoyed this, your feedback in the chat. And until next time, everyone, stay strong and live vegan.